Hello and welcome back to David Galata Book Dreamer. I'm David Galata and I'm still dreaming up new books. It looks like I have my cat with me. Come on up. Come on up, sweetie. Here we go. This is my sweet girl. This is Aria. Oh, she's purring. She's so sweet. Sometimes she likes to join me up here in the studio. So it's getting hot. Today I want to talk about the topic of superheroes, and I'll get back into some of the other things that I wanted to talk about in terms of the universe that I'm building for my novels. However, superheroes do show up in some of my novels, and I figured I would just touch on that a little bit. Superheroes. What's up with superheroes? I mean, is that its own genre? Is it a subgenre? There's a lot of arguments about that because most superheroes seem to be uh, a bit on the science fiction side. We don't really see a lot of fantasy superheroes. There are some, there are some that do magic and all of that. Um, Doctor Strange comes to mind and whatnot, but a lot of the superheroes that we see have more to do with scientific experiments gone wrong or gone right, and how they affect the main character and the people around them. A lot of it has to do with science fiction. I mean, let's face it, Superman himself was an alien. He's not even terrestrial. Batman has always got, all kinds of gadgets and things like that. And, let's look at Iron Man, very science fiction. The Hulk is very science fiction. Uh, Captain America starts off as a science fiction experiment. So, are superheroes their own genre, or are they a subgenre of science fiction? That's a really close shave there. It's tough to tell sometimes. I mean, now the kitten is pouncing on Arya. Please excuse them. They're gonna make noise. They like to chase each other. Little Puck's just like a teacup of a kitten, and he thinks he's the boss. It doesn't work well most of the time, but he won't stop. Very determined to take over. Superheroes can be fantasy based. I really do believe that. I believe that superheroes can be a fantasy genre. And, it comes to mind things like Conan. Is Conan a superhero? Or is he simply a fantasy character? You know, I don't know. He gets kind of super. I mean, the guy's got muscles on his muscles, fabulous swords and all of that. And you don't see that in, say, Lord of the Rings. You don't have these incredible individuals that takes over and saves the day. It's usually groups of people. Fantasy does do a lot of that with groups of people rather than a singular person and following them through their trials and tribulations and heroics. So, yeah, there's a case for superheroes being its own genre. Uh, I think a lot of times the confusion comes from the fact that comic books or graphic novels, for those who prefer, and there are some serious graphic novels out there, The Watchmen, for example, Nemesis. These comic books were never taken seriously until very recently. We forget that, 2 generations ago, comic books were not necessarily taken seriously. They were written for children, and they were not necessarily made for serious literature. But I think that's changed. Neil Gaiman's Sandman. I mean, that is quite the sophisticated piece of writing and illustration. Let's face it, very artsy. The Watchmen with a very deep story and a more traditional kind of comic book uh, illustration, But that doesn't really take away from the story itself. The story was very complex, had a lot of depth to it. So comic books emerged as kind of their own thing when they weren't being like there was a comic book company called Gold Key. Gold Key used to do classics. They did Flash Gordon. They did something about prehistory. They would sometimes do historical pieces, historical work. They would illustrate famous books. And they saw themselves as a way of educating younger people on the joys of reading. And, for the most part, they did a good job. They did have some original pieces, like Turok, Son of Stone, which as a child I really enjoyed. You know, uh, Native Americans and, dinosaurs. How can you go wrong? It's a great topic. It's a wonderful match together. And Turok himself was just a wonderful character. He was strong and wise and knowledgeable, and he never gave up. And his nephew and well, he was a really nice kid. Things were interesting. It was a very very interesting series as a comic book, and it's a shame that it's died away because I thought it was really well done, very well illustrated, more so than many of the others, and that was Gold Key's thing. They were really tight with their illustrations. But Detective Comics, DC, in other words, had its own niche in the comic book world. And, that was the Detective Comics angle. And then Marvel Comics had its own thing, being very, kind of out there and very far-flung ideas and unusual situations. So, everyone was kind of competing for attention as comic books, but it wasn't really until I would say about 20 years ago that they really started being taken very, very seriously as works of literature. Hmm, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Having comic books being acknowledged and then, as a form of writing, as an art along with art, visual arts, that happened earlier, but 20 years ago, there was a major shift. Now, some people say, well, that's because of all the movies and everything that's come out about it. And there is some truth to that. But I think it had to do with the fact that the comic book companies wanted to be taken seriously so badly that they became more discriminating about how well written they were, the storylines that were involved, and the artwork. So sloppiness was no longer an option, and being mediocre was a death knell. So everything had to be right and tight the first time, and getting very artsy. You really started seeing more and more of the artistic graphic novels, and that trend started, oh, I don't know. It had been around for a while, but I think it really started to build up a lot of steam about 30 years ago. And then, it suddenly became its own thing, became its own form of written storytelling. So graphic novels really put this kind of storytelling on the map. But when you're a writer of novels and you don't have illustrations in your books, like myself, could I? Yes. Do I? No. I like the written word and how it invokes visual imagery in the minds of the reader. I want my readers to be using their own imaginations and exercising that when they are reading my books. So I tend to be very visual with my descriptions so that you get enough keys so you can really see what's going on. And there are superheroes in some of my stories. Now, particularly, I have placed superheroes in the genre of science fiction. And that is actually, I think, more traditional. You know, you see more of the superhero type character in science fiction. It's easier to explain. It's easier to, you know, build an idea of someone who goes beyond the norm through a more scientific, speculative process than through, well, the three fates, clap their hands and suddenly this person is given all these goodies. That works great for legends and fables and myth. I don't think it works well with literature as much. Unless someone really has to struggle for it and has struggles because of their powers, then I kind of question whether it is a superhero. Now, one could make the case that Michael Moorcock's Elric cycle is indeed about a superhero. Elric is miserable, let's face it, and his powers and his abilities, while they do save the day, they also cause him tremendous problems, and he's very isolated from everyone else, even his own species. That's very reminiscent of a comic book character, a superhero. And in there, he really is a superhero, even though he's really an anti-hero. Yet we have that as well. Batman could also be seen kind of as an anti-hero. He is breaking the law by becoming a vigilante. And that brings a lot of issues into play. And this is what makes it tense and exciting, and it pulls you in. So using superheroes in science fiction stories, I don't really see a problem with, as long as those superheroes fit the society that you're placing them in. And that was really key for me in both Veil of Strife and Painful Medicine, which are volumes 2 and 3 of the Crucible Spirals. I had to make sure that the superheroes that I was placing into these books fit the culture, fit the action, and did not seem just absolutely impossible. Were they leaps of faith? Yes. Were they leaps of the imagination? Oh, absolutely. But they were not so far out that they no longer fit the genre they were in. These were individuals who were using their own inventions and their own determination to choose a side in the civil war that breaks out within Ganges, which is what the Crucible Spirals is all about. So, yeah, I would say use superheroes, but use them judiciously. Be careful about how far you take it. Otherwise, they can take over the story. If you want your science fiction story to basically solely feature a superhero, oh, by all means, go right ahead. In which case you have made, say, a science fiction book about the far future where someone has these amazing powers because of something that happened and how it both enlightens their life and makes it really interesting and at the same time really drives them crazy because it's destroying everything they love. Absolutely, by all means. But if you want to introduce superheroes into a novel that already has main characters, keep them a little arm's length. Keep them just a little at arm's length because it would be so easy for them to break free on their own and create a mess of your narrative. So don't allow that to happen. That's something I'm being very careful with the books that I'm writing now. There is a superhero character, and thank goodness she's there because in Stellar Trespassers, it really hits the fan for poor Ganges. And now in Siege of Ganges, which I'm editing now, it's been finished, yay! And now it's in editing phase. Uh, it's important for me to keep this person, this superhero, from taking over the narrative. And there's a lot of ways of doing that. And I'm taking a very particular path where this superhero is working for Naga, working for the AI of Ganges. And so that is and is introduced here and there, is not a major part, but she is there to save the day sometimes. And she is there to get in trouble sometimes. And you're like, wow, how's she going to get out of this one? You're like, wow, it was so cool. She was there. And yes, she absolutely did it. You know, this is great, but she's not the main character for the book. She's at most a secondary character. And I want to keep her that way because most of my science fiction is about normal humans and how they respond and react to the things that happen to them while they are in the ship Ganges and how they resolve the issues that have come before them. So I hope this was an interesting topic. I know I find it interesting. Um, I don't have anything against superheroes, but use them judiciously. If someday I write a book about superheroes, you'll hear about it. And I'll let you know when that's coming out if it does. So in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this. Please do subscribe. It does help. Nice seeing more numbers on the YouTube page here. I really appreciate that. And feel free to write some comments here and let me know what you're thinking. Would love to answer back. All right, everyone. You have a great week and happy reading.